Thank you and welcome to my channel, Simply Your World, where we discuss past and present events that will affect you if they haven't already. And in my previous episode, we highlighted connectionism as one of the psychological mechanisms used to control the Black culture as an individual, starting with the individual, but overall forming the collective. In this episode, we will be discussing the 5 symptoms of being blindly involved with these 5 categories, which overall make up the technology or the psychology of connectionism. So, from my unofficial psychologist point of view, those 3 symptoms are emptiness, loneliness, and anxiety. And if you don't have the opposite of those 3 things, which are emptiness is fullness of life or something to live for, loneliness is companionship, and anxiety is calmness. If you don't have these 3 antidotes, or what I like to call antidotes, you will do what some people call crash out. And you have to remember, crashing out looks different for everybody. So that's why I say these are the 3 main underlying reasons why the Black community has this no care attitude that's so prevalent. I'm going to play a 3-minute video about the first symptom I mentioned, emptiness. And I'm going to fade in and out periodically, maybe once or twice as the video plays, to hit on a few topics or a few points that they make that I don't want to miss that actually drives my point home. So again, please stay tuned.
In 1953, May published Man's Search for Himself, in which he explores these problems that are perhaps more relevant than ever in our modern age. When society can no longer give us a clear picture of our values and standards, of what we are and what we ought to be, we're then thrown back on the search for ourselves. This is one of the few blessings of living in an age of anxiety. To venture causes anxiety, but not to venture is to lose oneself. To venture in the highest sense is precisely to become conscious of oneself. May observed that many people feel a sense of emptiness in their lives. They have no definite experience of their own desires or wants, and have painful feelings of powerlessness. People may well know what they should do: to study, get a job, fall in love, marry and raise a family, but it is soon evident, even to them, that they are describing what others expect of them, rather what they themselves want.
Remember, we're discussing how being too blindly involved with these 5 categories that make up the technology of connectionism. Also, we are breaking down these 3 symptoms, starting with emptiness, to show how they contribute to the plight of the Black society. In that last clip, you hear rhetoric like himself, oneself, ourselves. And a lot of people believe that the self is the aesthetic person or the physical person that you see, which in a lot of ways that it is. But every person is made up of 6 different factions, and you all can fact check this if you like. It is the persona, the ego, the self, the shadow, which is the dark side of every person, the anima, which is the female personification in male, and then you have the animus, which is the male personification in woman or a female, okay? So when you hear words like oneself, ourself, himself, you must realize it is going much deeper than just the person you see, because the persona is the face for the outside world. The ego props up the persona, in return is fed by the persona. We'll definitely get deeper into that. And the self is the person you are when you are alone, or the things that you truly want to do outside of whatever it takes to feed your persona. You know what I mean? So, or your peer group, or however it goes. I'm not going to get too much deeper on the shadow, the anima, and the animus just yet. That's a topic for another time. But you hear also in that last clip, you heard him say there's no definite experience of their own wants or desires. What does it truly mean to experience? And check this out. I want you to think about this. What does it truly mean to not experience your own wants or desires? Now, if we take away all the fluff, all the materialism, and we get down to the core of what the complaint is about the Black man in general, or the Black society in general, it is a few things. They don't take care of their families, or they run away from their children. They don't have, they're lazy, they're this, they're that, right? All the core values that it seems like all the other nations carry, while we're running around just carrying the materialism, all right? And this is what I mean by the persona and the ego. our personas to the outside world in one way or another has to be, I'm okay, I'm all right, I'm doing good, I'm doing me, right? And then that stimulus you get from the outside world or through the persona feeds the ego. This is what I meant by the persona is your original face you show everybody. And then the ego props up the persona. And the persona feeds the ego. So it's like a back and forth thing right there. And then later on in our next clip, we're going to show you how, while you're paying attention to the materialism, while you're paying attention to your persona, trying to make sure it's intact, while you're paying attention to your ego, making sure it's intact, you are neglecting the self, the one self, the himself, the ourself, that part that lays underneath the ego. You are neglecting it. And after a while, like I said, in the next clip, you're going to show, they call it running into a wall. But I call it either crashing out, or later on in life, you can call it a midlife crisis or whatever. They realize that the things that they truly wanted to do, they never did. So they're feeling empty, which causes stagnation, which causes loneliness, which causes anxiety. And we're definitely going to get into all those things. So please stay tuned.
As one person put it, I'm just a collection of mirrors, reflecting what everyone else expects of me. The poet, T.S. Eliot's prophetic words, describes the spirit of the age. We are the hollow men, we are the stuffed men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw, alas, shape without form, shade without color, paralyzed force, gesture without motion. Some may say that this feeling of emptiness represents living in a time of uncertainty and turmoil, so how can one attain inner integration in a disintegrated world? May believes that the question of which age we live in is irrelevant. This is a perennial problem, and no society can perform for the individual or relieve him from his task of self-realization and from the obstacles that are in his way. And no traumatic world situation can rob the individual of the privilege of making the final decision with regard to himself. Each person must come to his own consciousness of himself, and he does this on a level which transcends the particular age he lives in. It is not unusual to blame the times we live in for our problems, instead of inquiring whether something may not well be severely out of joint within ourselves. To be mentally sound, man must constantly be struggling and striving for a worthwhile goal. It is often the case that those that feel empty and hollow are the more sensitive and gifted members of society, in contrast to the well-adjusted citizen who is able for the time being to cover up his underlying conflicts. There is a sense of accomplishment that comes with fulfilling external goals. However, as one continues to progress externally, there comes a time when one suddenly hits a wall. This is where the most important task of one's life begins, namely, the search for oneself. The clearest picture of the empty life is the modern man who moves through a routine, mechanical existence year after year, almost as if he didn't really live his life, but rather is dragged by it.
That last clip brought everything full circle, because remember, we spoke on these three topics: emptiness, loneliness, and anxiety. And not having the opposite of those things, or the opposite of emptiness is fullness of life. The opposite of loneliness is companionship. The opposite of anxiety is calmness. Now, in the last clip, it said, to be mentally sound, man must be striving for a worthwhile goal. But you have to remember, in this context, we're talking about the traditional family and core values such as family, friends, hard work, commitment. Those are the core values, all right? But in the Black community, to the man, seemingly, it's been removed from our situation, right? But then it says, it is often those that feel empty and hollow are the more sensitive and gifted members of society. What about the man that just take care of his family, don't have a lot of friends? He knows, he sees what's going on, woke, what you call woke before it was hijacked. That's another story too. But yet they don't have a lot of friends. They don't have a lot of family, but yet at the same time, they understand what's going on in their. And on the other hand, you have the well-adjusted citizen that is able to cover up his underlying conflicts while there is a sense of accomplishment that comes with fulfilling external goals. Now, go back to the language. The underlying conflicts, that is ignoring yourself, while there is a sense of accomplishment that comes with fulfilling external goals. And those external goals are set by the wants and the needs of the outside world. And your persona is, and the persona is built on what those wants and needs are. And the ego shapeshifts, okay? Because it depends on what your values are, what things you start to value is what starts to feed the ego that props up the persona, right? And now you should be able to form a picture in your mind why the situation of the black man is the way that it is, because we focus on so many material things just to prop up and feed the persona from the food that comes from the outside world, while the self deteriorates, while the things that you truly wanted to do go away, you know. And this is where the stagnation comes in, because there is no core values. Everybody knows the materialism fades. So as it fades, you do what's called hit a wall, or have to look at yourself in the mirror. You know, you have to pay attention to yourself now, because all the things you had, or all the things that you were enjoying as a young man or young woman, are starting to fade. And then you start to realize that these things are no longer. But guess what? This cycle can happen at any age, because it from an early age, the black man, or really the black man, really, because the man is the ones removed from the home. You know, he doesn't have those, when we talked about experience again, those observations of facts and events. You know, so the lazy black man can be formed at a very early age, but it doesn't show itself until it's time for him to take care of himself, or to take care of a family, or to be commitment, or show commitment, or to be dedicated, or show love. You know what I mean? So those things that are missing are the things that are being played up now, because like I said, the younger black man can be subjected to these same things too. You know what I mean? But as we go forward, this last the one line in this clip should bring it all home for you. And it says, the clearest picture of the empty life is the modern man who moves through a routine, mechanical existence year after year, almost as if he didn't live his life but was dragged by it. When you hold the picture or the plight and the situation of the black man up to that last statement, I really don't even have to give any commentary to it. It's so much I could say, but now with that statement, you can start to apply what I'm saying to you, to the things that you see around you, the people you see around you. Next, we're going to move into stagnation. And this is the perfect piggyback to what we're talking about, to show you how emptiness, loneliness, and anxiety causes stagnation in a person, but specifically the black man in his situation.
It is a curious commentary on people's fear of time that if much time passes without their being aware of it, they assume they've had a good time. A good time is thus defined as escaping boredom. It is as though the goal were to be as little alive as possible, as though life is an unprofitable episode that disturbs an otherwise blessed state of non-existence. When we are bored, we tend to go to sleep, that is, to blot out consciousness, and become as nearly extinct as possible. The monotonous path of the hollow man is easily followed most of the time. However, one day, the why arises. The human being cannot live in a condition of emptiness for very long. If he's not growing towards something, he does not merely stagnate. The repressed emotions turn into morbidity and despair, and eventually into destructive activities. In Jungian terms, it feeds the shadow, the unconscious dark side of one's personality, until it becomes big enough to take control over one's life as an autonomous entity. The experience of emptiness comes from our feeling that we're powerless to do anything effective about our lives or the world we live in. In such a case, one soon gives up wanting and feeling and becomes apathetic as a self-defense mechanism. When a person continually faces dangers he is powerless to overcome, his final line of defense is at last to avoid even feeling the dangers.
The last clip illustrates how emptiness creates three figures that are detrimental to the black culture as we know it. It went on to say that it is like the goal is to be as little alive as possible, as though life is an unprofitable episode that disturbs an otherwise bliss state of non-existence. When we are bored, we go to sleep, to blot out consciousness and become as nearly as extinct as possible. Is that not the homeless guy that we see every day? Is that not the guy that we see drunk every day? Is that not the guy that we see sleep on the corner, on the bus stop, in front of the gas station, in front of the grocery store, just wherever, right? Because what he's doing, he's trying to blot out consciousness because he feels powerless over his situation. He feels empty, he has nothing to live for. He probably burnt a lot of bridges or whatever the case is. So that's why they turn to the drugs. That's why they turn to the streets. That's why, because there's nothing else to, and they also have a lot of anxiety. We're going to talk about anxiety in another video, but they're looking for something to hold on to. A lot of people don't have those things, so they just drink themselves into a stupor just to blot out consciousness. And we're witness with, and you've seen it, you're seeing it now, that there is a reason for these things. People just don't fall out of society for no reason. We all understand that, but everybody also understands that it's a cycle that no one can figure out. Once we start to understand that these things go all the way back, way deeper than, just a few years or a few days, we got to start with a certain generation of children. We got to start with a new generation. We got to raise our children in a different way. We got to instill different values. So later on in life, when it's time for them to take care of themselves, like I said earlier, it's time for them to take care of a family. It's time for them to have commitment and hard work. Then they will have an experience of these things. If any of that makes sense, I really hope it does. Okay. Okay, it goes also on to say again, the human cannot live in a condition of emptiness for too long. If he is not growing towards something, he does not only stagnate, but repressed emotions turn into morbidity and despair, and eventually into destructive activities. In Jungian terms, it feeds the shadow, the unconscious dark side of our personality, until it becomes big enough to take control over one's life. I don't think I have to explain that one too much. When they hit on the destructive activities, we already know what guy that is. That's the young guy. That's like the older guy, whoever is killing everybody, nothing to live for. Again, emptiness, you have to have something to live for. People that's doing all these different things, they have absolutely nothing to live for, right? Then the things that they have in common, the homeless man and the guy with nothing to live for, what they have in common is there's no goal. And here's the example. It is like the goal, as it first stated, it is like the goal is to be as little alive as possible. Because there is no goals, now the goal is to just do away with everything. So there is no goals in this homeless man. There is, and then the man is sleep on the corner or this drunk. Then okay, I'll say now I'm talking about the younger guy. The human cannot live in a condition of emptiness for too long. If he is not growing towards something, he does not only stagnate, but repressed emotions turn into morbidity. I want to highlight the part when it says he is not growing towards something. Is that not a goal? So what makes the homeless man and the man with no care attitude the same guy or have something in common is that there's no goals or there are no experiences of their, of their wants, of their needs, of commitment, of hard work, So this is the reason why, again, I said it was important for someone to remove the dad or the father from the home, to not have these experiences, remember I said, not have the observation of facts or events. So it leaves them in a tailspin. So by the time they get older, they don't have a clue on how to take care of the things that make the core values of life or the core responsibilities of life. So emptiness is really detrimental to the Black community. All right. Then it also said, well, first of all, before I move forward, morbidity. When it says it was strangled, but the repressed emotions turn into morbidity. The definition of morbidity is conditions of suffering from a disease or medical condition. I told you all to get down to your molecules. I can't say it enough. What makes you sick? Cells, mucus, these things, so you don't necessarily have to be physically sick either. You can be emotionally sick. You can be financially sick, not knowing how to deal with your finances. Remember, there are experiences. So if you don't have experiences of these things, these are the things that you need, the building blocks you need to become the whole person or to feel full, I guess, in life, right? So you also have the despair. Despair is complete loss of hope. That's the drunk guy. That's the guy that's killing everybody. That's the guy with nothing to live for. There is no hope. There is no loss. So fuck everybody, right? I hope this is making sense. And I don't think I'm too far off. If I am, please let me know. Then you have when a person, it also said, when a person continually faces dangers he is powerless to overcome, his final line of defense is to not feel the dangers at all. That's the guy who just completely just falls out of society. Don't want to work, don't want to do this. He ain't even necessarily got to be on drugs. He's just what I forgot what Tech Nine said with the slacker. He's the slacker. So that's 3 guys that are created by emptiness alone. The next video, we're going to get into loneliness. And they create loneliness is a big one as well, because it creates a whole different type of figure in the Black culture that is very detrimental. Thanks for watching.